2,000 years Christ shall return, and when him return, him going to be King of Kings.
Brawls, battles, blood, tears, fights, riots, death. These rebels have seen it all. Throughout history, there have been many brave souls who have stood up what they believed in and fought extremely long and hard for it. They didn't give up and they fought until the end. Some failed and some succeeded, but if it were not for them, the world would not be the same. Many people hear the word rebellion and automatically assume it is unhealthy, immoral, and deficient, but that is not always the case. Those who start rebellions are real, true leaders. Rebellions are open, organized acts of conflict towards a higher power, but if there were not rebellions, then we would not have revolutions. Throughout history, revolutions are drastic changes that affected society, usually for the better. While many countries were in desperate need of drastic changes and new reforms, those whom have stepped up and started and created rebellions are true heroes of our unforgettable history. Many Mexican immigrants came to the United States to work, working mainly in large fields picking crops, fruits, and vegetables, working extremely long, hard hours of backbreaking labor for a surprisingly small amount of money. They had horrible working conditions, and there were not laws protecting them. Mexican leader and reform creator to be, Cesar Chavez, along with many other children, were forced to work on the farms instead of attending school. These times were extremely hard and difficult for the Mexican community. As Cesar grew up, he fought for the immigrant farmers. He fought long and hard. He never gave up. Cesar started unions and urged people to go on strike. They formed picket lines and marched up and down in front of vineyard gates to press their demand for union recognition and to discourage outside workers from taking jobs in the field. He organized marches and boycotts, both very rebellious acts. Chavez believed in nonviolence approaches, which helped with his successful revolution. He organized a march from Delano to Sacramento, a long 300 miles to walk. In the biography Farm Worker's Friend, Cesar Chavez, the author describes the march as a, quote, a success, gaining publicity for the strikers, getting the attention of government officials, and putting pressure on vineyard owners, end quote. Cesar Chavez saw what was happening to the people of the Mexican community, and he did not agree with it. He did not agree with the extremely low wages and long hours of backbreaking labor and the use of harmful pesticides. He also didn't agree with the fact that there was not health insurance offered to the families working in the fields. He started committees and stuck true to his morals, values, and beliefs while staying true to the Mexican community as well. Cesar really just wanted what was best for everyone. After fighting many long and hard years, Cesar was the leader of a successful revolution. But if it were not for Cesar rebelling against the growers and rebelling against society, he would not have been able to change as much as he did. Mexican migrant workers were granted higher wages, picking bonuses, health insurance, and regulations prohibiting the use of hard pesticides, all of which were on the top of Cesar's priority list. Another rebel who changed the world is Maximilien Robespierre. Between 1789 and 1792, rebellious acts were made by Robespierre, and they were followed by a forever-changing revolution in France. He saw there needed to be change when Louis XVI was not doing a good job in running the country fairly. There were huge economic inequality issues running throughout the country. Robespierre was highly educated and sided with the peasants and lower and middle class. He fought for a constitution. He was elected as States General of Artois and gained respect through his patriotic speeches. He preached in his speeches that, quote, the guilty must be executed as traitors, so the people would not lose faith in the laws, end quote. Robespierre began to rise in the Jacobson Club. He provided them with stability during this hard, chaotic time. In September of 1792, monarchy was officially abolished. This was a huge victory for Robespierre, and on July 27, 1793, he was added to the Committee of Public Safety. Just days before he was added to the committee, King Louis XVI was beheaded because he was seen as a traitor to the French people. France was at war with most of Britain, which had an effect on his success. France, as a country, wanted and was in desperate need of a leader, especially during the unfortunate time of war. As he gained more power, he started to press charges against innocent people that disagreed with him. They unfortunately received the death penalty. He started turning on his partners because he saw them as a threat to his power. He went on a killing spurt. He was so blinded by his views, beliefs, and morals, he was eventually fighting against what he preached for before, the safety of the people. He was not open-minded, and he thought he could take over the task of changing France with little help. Revolutionary leaders cannot do it by themselves, as well as using violent tactics to defeat violence. Due to his morally right views and beliefs for the people, Robespierre was a successful revolutionary leader until he started taking innocent lives. Another important historical figure who has helped change the world is Nelson Mandela. Mandela was an active member of the African National Congress Youth League, which, according to an article published in African Affairs, he, quote, helped transform the African National Congress from a lobbying organization into a radical mass movement, end quote. Africa was in major need of a change, and the ANC was there to help. Finally, there was something that could help the helpless in Africa. In 1964, he was sentenced to life in prison. Mandela and many others were charged with plotting to overthrow the South African government by military means. Before they were taken off to be in prison, they had a chance to explain themselves, stating, and I quote, "Above all, we want equal political rights, because without them, our disabilities will be permanent. I know this sounds revolutionary to the whites in this country because the majority of voters will be Africans. This makes the white man fear democracy. But this fear cannot be allowed to stand in the way of the only solution which will guarantee racial harmony and freedom for all. It is not true that the infringement of all will result in radical domination." Nelson Mandela stuck next to his beliefs and values and wanted what was best for society as a whole. Many people stood up for Mandela and the other political leaders that were sent to jail. A Free Mandela campaign was started, and it demanded the release of the prisoners. After 27 years of wrongful imprisonment, Mandela was released and elected president 4 years later. During his presidency term, he produced economic stability, freed whites from guilt as being seen as oppressors, blacks from oppression, free education system, free medicine, and health care for pregnant women and young children, affordable housing with clean water and electricity, a major revolution for Africans, and it all started with rebellion. Martin Luther King Jr. was another very rebellious man, although he took part in a very important revolution. He used nonviolent tactics to fight for civil rights for African Americans. He wrote several speeches and fought until the day he died for what he believed in, which was equality for all. His wife, Coretta Scott King, talks about him, saying, "He gave his life for the poor of the world, the garbage workers of Memphis and the peasants of Vietnam." Boycotts, marches, and strikes are all rebellious acts Dr. King committed during his civil rights movement. Unfairly, he was arrested several times for sticking up for his beliefs and values, all of which were morally and ethically right. He fought for equal rights for Black American citizens, and in the process he was often physically and verbally abused. If it were not for the rebellious acts of Martin Luther King Jr., racism and unfair laws against African Americans could still have continued, possibly for years or even decades. While some of these historical rebels used nonviolent tactics, others like Ho Chi Minh used violent tactics. It was when France failed to grant Japan with independence when Ho Chi Minh realized he would have to fight for it. The Indochina War was then started in December of 1946. Ho Chi Minh was the leader of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, also known as DRV. The DRV military forces, under his control, attacked the French. Ho Chi Minh was willing to borrow from various sources to hammer out an effective strategy of national liberation. He played a more significant role in formulating the Vietnamese version of People's War. Japan was currently under European control, and Ho Chi Minh was not scared to rebel against the country's rulers. He was fighting for independence not only for himself, but for his country as a whole. When Minh noticed his country was not ready to start a revolution against the French colonial authority, he believed a close alliance between workers and peasants was the proper road to revolution in colonial Indochina. Ho Chi Minh's support for the Vietnamese struggle for national independence led to the attack on Pearl Harbor, which forced the United States to enter the war. He was quite the troublemaker of his time. Towards the end of the Pacific War, he returned to northern Vietnam to prepare for a general uprising, in other words, a rebellion. He then turned to China for help. They shared their secret tactics and joined forces with Japan. Unlike many other powerful leaders, he did not use nonviolent tactics. In rebelling for a revolution, Minh started alliances with other countries and started wars which fought for his beliefs, national independence, and social reforms for his country. He tried making concessions with the French before he started the war, but they would not give Japan freedom. Therefore, he used violence and rebelled against France. This is when Japan started seeing a revolution unravel before their eyes. Vladimir Lenin, like Ho Chi Minh, led and created a successful revolution while using violent tactics. In a biography of Lenin, the author says, quote, Lenin symbolizes the Russian Revolution as a movement of the poor and oppressors of the earth, end quote. Lenin created his first large-scale work called What the Friends of the People Are. The piece of work was insisting for an organization for a Russian Social Democratic Party. He started producing illegal literature and sending it out to workers on strike, who would then pass it on to others. He was then sentenced to a year in prison. The author of the biography, Lenin and the Russian Revolution, talks about the Russian Revolution saying, quote, it freed Russia from foreign domination and exploration, gave her an independent foreign policy, defeated the foreign invader, and through manifold sufferings created the powerful USSR of today, end quote. Lenin took a big part of rebuilding the Social Democratic Party and the International Socialist Movement. In the War of 1914, he was arrested as a Russian spy. When Lenin returned to Russia after the February Revolution, he was made the head of the Bolshevik Party. He constantly sent letters to underground party leaders asking for information, advice, and suggestions. He also asked them to protest. He controlled the Bolshevik newspaper and dealt with arrangements for sending letters, weapons, and illegal literature in Russia. He took control of the revolution and changed the way Russia operated. Yes, he had to rebel against the law a few times, and yes, he was punished, but he never gave up on his beliefs, and he fought his whole life for what he believed in, which resulted in a new Rand country. Each and every one of the leaders that I have mentioned fought for the majority of their lives for what they believed in and valued in life. While some leaders were honest and truthful, others lied and did much damage to other people's lives. They not only fought for the rights of themselves, but for many other people and their country's citizens. These leaders fought for independence and freedom from their homeland, for their country. They tried to make the world a better place for everyone, and while some failed, others were great successors. They fought against government authorities and pushed for new, fair laws to help the common man. Many leaders in our history have died while fighting against intolerance and hatred. All of these great historic leaders did not fear a higher power or authority. They were not scared of getting in trouble or being wrongfully punished. It was because these incredible leaders started rebellions, revolts, and uprisings that a revolution was born.